With such a stellar array of titles propping up and exemplifying why 2017 was one of the best years in gaming this decade, it's only natural there'd be just as much forgettable nonsense alongside. The proliferation of digital storefronts comes with the ability to stuff them full of unwanted, barely functioning toss. Just look at the majority of what's on the Switch, for example, contributing to a year that thankfully still had enough stellar releases to not get too affected. From new consoles and hardware innovations to landmark sequels and revivals alongside, 2017 will be remembered in a positive light forevermore, in gaming at least, but there were some almighty missed opportunities along the way. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 worst video games of 2017. Number 10, Sonic Forces. After the fan-pleasing and fan-made delights of Sonic Mania, it was over to the official Sonic team to see what 2017's more official installment would be. Sadly, despite Christian Whitehead and the team at Headcanon showing that 2D Sonic really is the only way the character works, Sonic Forces does attempt a good slew of side-on platforming levels, but the majority is more of the same turgid, auto-playing, over-shoulder garbage. There's simply a complete lack of tactility when controlling Sonic, despite one admittedly cool idea of customizing a character and then injecting them into the saga. Sonic Forces is one of the most sobering reminders that Sega themselves haven't got a clue what to do with their most popular character, instead trying to please two different fan bases who really want two different things. In the end, not a single element of Sonic Forces feels like it was given anything close to the level of love, care, and passion that pours out of Sonic Mania, and that demonstrably shows you which one to pick up. Number 9, Agents of Mayhem. Aiming to be the next major franchise from Volition, Agents of Mayhem is set in one of the many timeline fractures from the close of Saints Row 4, yet it retains less than zero of that series' charm and excellent writing. Instead, we got generic gruff action heroes, cringeworthy comedy, and basic loot grind gameplay letting you rank up rote skills like plus 2% damage or increased XP. It's repetitive, truly opaque stuff, almost working in a serviceable manner as gameplay is playable and somewhat satisfying every now and then, but there's no propulsion to anything. Agents of Mayhem had everything to prove, an entire blank canvas and the eyes of the world on its first steps, only for everything to feel truly off-putting on a fundamental level. Number 8, Ghost Recon Wildlands. Speaking of things just not coming together, the return of Ghost Recon should have been a glorious thing, especially since Ubisoft were rolling together their Far Cry open world tech with the Division's combat. In reality, not a single part of controlling Wildlands felt worthwhile or even that it had been playtested. Vehicles devoid of all physics would rattle and bounce off even the tiniest outcrops of land, all as your characters sat there stock still, having not been programmed for anything like this. Combat, mission design, and general progression did provide satisfaction as you're fundamentally shooting gang members in the head and parachuting about the place with a slew of upgrades unlocking in tow, but no matter what, it never feels all that purposeful. Instead, Wildlands is gaming's version of a bag of pork scratchings. Basic, comforting, but ultimately shameless unless you're drunk. Number 7, Lego Worlds. On paper, phenomenal. In reality, a god-awful, overpriced, early access feeling product that had more in common with a Steam Greenlight project than anything on console. The real crying shame is that this should have been the ultimate Lego toy box. Literally Minecraft with Lego, giving players unlimited access to all the Lego properties, from city to undercover and everything in between as you set about building whatever you like. Actually playing Lego Worlds came with terrible frame rate issues and a god-awful first-pass menu where you'd actually have to search for what to click on to get anything going. It remains the case that Lego's biggest recent successes relate to their licensed tie-in games and deals. This is only a cold, harsh reminder that outside of those characters and worlds propping this thing up, there is nothing to recommend. Number 6, Lawbreakers. Considering the fact that this was headed up by Cliff Bleszinski, who once brought us Gears of War, Lawbreakers is a monumentally crippling, shockingly generic release that should have been better in every respect. Currently having a truly disastrous player count, Lawbreakers is quite possibly the biggest flop of the year. In reality, its base gameplay is responsive and experimental enough. The game discards gravity in parts of the map so you can fly towards players, yet in a world where Overwatch dominates everything even remotely character-focused in the first-person shooter space, it just didn't stand a chance. Number 5, Destiny 2. Look, it has to be said, outside of some stellar combat, Destiny 2 is an awful game. Literally, the only recommendable feature is that it has solid shooting and can maintain a frame rate when all hell breaks loose, but every aspect of the surrounding framework is appallingly bland and notably phoned in. The story? As generic as they come, focused on taking down a giant meat-headed alien, a ride that's serviceable enough, sure, but literally goes nowhere outside of that base description. The multiplayer? Entirely designed around repeating the same missions over and over, grinding out gear that increases one cumulative number one digit at a time. And lastly, the general mentality of this even being a sequel? Parodic, being the exact same menus are prevalent, as is the same character creator, and this lack of progression all combines to feel like one giant expansion pack. I'm sure many die-hard fans have had a fun time questing together, and objectively, again, the base shooting is exemplary, but it must be said just how soulless and almost churned out the rest of the game feels. Number 4, WWE 2K18 on Switch. Take a wrestling franchise that struggled to have acceptable gameplay for years, then put it on a demonstrably underpowered system with barely any effort given to optimization. The result is WWE 2K18, a game that even at full speed is a turgid affair, literally running in slow motion. Not only that, but due to the Switch's Tegra processors, visual fidelity had to take a knock for it to run at all. At time of recording, and look, here's hoping that it does eventually get fixed, WWE 2K18 on Switch is a blurry, barely controllable, unresponsive mess. And although it's certainly cool seeing all this potential squeezed onto a handheld console, it's certainly not worth the money. Better luck next time, 2K, and my heart goes goes out to anyone who snapped this up through sheer blind faith. Number 3, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. With Super Mario Run, Fire Emblem Heroes, and now Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, you really have to wonder whether Nintendo are deliberately releasing watered down, less playable, and fundamentally lesser versions of their flagship franchises to encourage a transition onto the proper version. Remember, Pokemon Go came from Niantic, and it was a fluke that Nintendo had essentially forgot they licensed in the first place. I really can't think of any other rationale, because as ridiculous as that is, Animal Crossing's debut on handheld is essentially Fetch Quest the game. All the charm, characterful writing, and immersion of finding your place amongst this town full of anthropomorphized animals is replaced with literally just a series of find this, bring it back mission design. The overarching idea is that you're building the ultimate campsite for all your guests, yet that boils down to asking for a list of items for a given person and then crafting them. You acquire crafting components by shaking trees and catching fish, then you're forced to wait while things are assembled. Or, of course, you can purchase leaf tickets with real money to speed everything along. There's nothing inherently, fundamentally offensively bad about Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, but considering its potential and the sheer lifelessness prevalent throughout, there are a lot of immediate negatives that drag it far down this list. Number 2, Mass Effect Andromeda. Who thought that BioWare could actually mess up Mass Effect more than they did with Mass Effect 3? As unlikely as that was when the sequel/spin-off was first announced, we now stand at a time where Mass Effect as a franchise is on ice, thanks to Andromeda's reception being genuinely awful. Broken animations, repetitive fetch quest heavy gameplay, designed by committee characters, and terrible checkpoints losing huge chunks of progress, Andromeda was as deflating to play as it is sad to remember. Even worse is that BioWare are now on track to release Anthem, a microtransaction and loot grind heavy action RPG that should be the next Mass Effect, yet the reality comes from knowing the series will never really return. Number 1, Vroom in the Night Sky. Remember how in the introduction I mentioned how digital storefronts are awash in churned out toss? Games like Vroom in the Night Sky are entirely that, indicative of a free market mentality that apparently isn't linked to any quality testing before being showcased to audiences of millions. From late 90s-esque character shapes to broken physics models, one engine noise on loop for the bike itself, and a base concept of, hey, it's a girl on a bike in space. Jazz hands. Vroom is a game so bad its own trailer can't even hide those faults. Hopefully this marks a notable bad point in the Switch's first year on sale, because honestly, if we can create something worse than this, it's kind of a damning comment on humanity as a species. And that's my list. Let me know in the comments below what the worst games of 2017 were. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.